Have you ever felt like an imposter in your own life? Like you were standing at the altar, about to marry the man of your dreams, but the air felt heavy? Now, imagine looking into the crowd and seeing the one person who wants to destroy you, wearing a dress brighter than your future, throwing her head back and laughing while you say your vows. This isn't a movie. This happened to a woman named Isabella at the most expensive wedding Newport, Rhode Island had seen in a decade. Everyone thought the drama would end with a ruined bride, but they forgot about one person, the terrifying, icy mother-in-law who had been watching in silence. Grab your tea, sit down, and listen closely. This is the story on how a mistress tried to steal the show and how a matriarch burned the whole house down. The invitations were printed on heavy, cream-colored cardstock with gold leaf lettering that cost more than Isabella's father's first car. The Sterling family requests the honor of your presence at the marriage of Titus Sterling and Isabella Davis. Even looking at it, 3 months before the date, Isabella felt a knot in her stomach. The name Davis looked so small, so plain next to Sterling. Titus was everything a girl from a mid-sized town in Ohio wasn't supposed to land. He was old money, the kind of money that didn't shout, but whispered in a language only other rich people understood. He was 32, charming, with a jawline that could cut glass and a portfolio of real estate investments that covered the eastern seaboard. Isabella was 26, a graphic designer who still checked the price of avocados before putting them in the cart. "You're overthinking it, Bella," Titus had said, wrapping his arms around her in the kitchen of their downtown loft. "My mother loves you. The family loves you. You're the breath of fresh air we need." He was lying. Or maybe he was just blind. Beatrice Sterling, the matriarch, did not love her. She tolerated her. She was a woman carved out of marble and expectation. When Isabella first met her, Beatrice looked at her off-the-rack shoes for exactly 2 seconds before smiling a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Charming," she had said. It sounded like an insult. But Isabella loved Titus. She truly did. And she thought that was enough to weather the storm of high society judgment. She thought that once the ring was on her finger, the whispers would stop. She was wrong. The whispers were just the warm-up act. The wedding was held at the Breakers in Newport. It was a humid, golden afternoon in late June. The air smelled of salt and hydrangeas, thousands of them, imported specifically for the day. Her bridesmaids, her 2 sisters, and her best friend Sarah were buzzing around the bridal suite, drinking mimosas and trying to figure out the intricate lacing of their dusty rose gowns. "You look like a literal princess," Sarah said, adjusting the veil. "Titus is going to faint." Isabella looked in the mirror. The dress was a Vera Wang custom, a gift from Beatrice. It was stunning. Lace sleeves, a corset bodice, a train that went on for miles. But it felt heavy. It felt like armor. "Has anyone seen Titus?" Isabella asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "He hasn't answered my text. He's probably getting his phone confiscated by his groomsmen," her sister Jenna laughed. "Stop worrying. He's not going to run." But it wasn't Titus running that she was worried about. It was the text message she had seen on his phone screen 2 nights ago. It had flashed up while he was in the shower. Sender, Chloe. Message: "You're really going through with this charade. See you Saturday, Richie." Isabella knew who Chloe was. Chloe Kensington, the daughter of a senator, a socialite who had dated Titus on and off for 5 years before he met Isabella. She was everything Isabella wasn't. Tall, blonde, effortlessly rich, and sharp as a tack. Beatrice adored her. When Isabella confronted Titus about the text, he had laughed it off. "She's crazy, Bella. She's not invited. Security has a list. She won't get within a mile of the venue." Isabella wanted to believe him. The ceremony was held on the lawn overlooking the Atlantic. A string quartet played Debussy. The guests were a sea of linen suits and designer fascinators. Isabella walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw Titus at the altar. He looked pale. He was smiling, but his eyes were darting around the crowd, scanning the faces. He's nervous, she told herself. Just wedding jitters. She reached him. He took her hand. His palm was clammy. "You look beautiful," he whispered, but his voice sounded tight. The officiant began. "We are gathered here today." Isabella tried to focus on the words, on the ocean breeze, on the smell of the roses. But then she heard it. Click, click, click. The distinct sound of heels on the stone pathway. Not the soft shuffle of latecomers sneaking in. This was a slow, deliberate march. A ripple of movement went through the guests on the left side. Heads turned. A few gasps. Her mother-in-law, Beatrice, who was sitting in the front row with a posture so straight she looked like she was balancing a book on her head, stiffened. Isabella didn't want to look. She wanted to keep her eyes on Titus. But Titus wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking past her shoulder, his face drained of all color. She turned. Standing at the back of the aisle, framed by the white archway of the entrance, was Chloe Kensington. She wasn't wearing a subtle guest dress. She wasn't wearing pastel. She was wearing a floor-length, backless gown in a shade of scarlet red, so bright it looked like a fresh wound against the backdrop of the blue ocean. It was tight, revealing, and completely inappropriate for a wedding. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and dark sunglasses, which she slowly removed as she locked eyes with the groom. She didn't sit down. She stood there, right in the center of the aisle, blocking the view, demanding to be seen. The officiant cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" "I do," her father said, his voice trembling slightly. He had seen her too. Everyone had. The ceremony continued, but the air had been sucked out of the space. Every word the officiant spoke felt hollow. The tension was a physical weight, pressing down on Isabella's chest. Then came the vows. Titus took her hands. They were shaking. Titus," he started, his voice cracking. "Take you, Isabella. To be my lawfully wedded wife," he managed to get out. And then it happened. From the back of the lawn, a sound cut through the solemn silence. It wasn't a cough. It wasn't a sneeze. It was a laugh. A loud, clear, musical laugh. It was cruel. It was the sound of someone watching a child try to perform a magic trick and failing miserably. "Ha!" Chloe threw her head back. She covered her mouth with a manicured hand, but she didn't stop. She laughed again, louder this time. "Oh God," she said, her voice carrying over the wind. "This is rich. To have and to hold, please." The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella's heart stopped. She stood there, frozen in her Vera Wang dress, feeling like the smallest person in the world. She looked at Titus, begging him to do something, to tell security to remove her, to yell, to defend her. Titus looked down at his shoes. He didn't say a word. The guests were murmuring now, a low buzz of shock and scandal. "Did you hear that? Is that Chloe?" "Oh my God, look at Titus." The officiant looked panicked. "Shall we continue?" Isabella looked at the front row. Her parents looked horrified. Her dad was halfway out of his seat, ready to confront the intruder, but her mum was holding him back, not wanting to make a scene. Then she looked at Beatrice. The mother-in-law. She hadn't turned around to look at Chloe. Not once. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her face unreadable behind a small mesh veil. She looked like a statue. She knew, Isabella thought, a cold realization washing over her. She knew Chloe was coming. Maybe she even invited her. This is her way of showing me I don't belong. Isabella swallowed the lump in her throat. She squeezed Titus's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. "Finish it," she hissed at him. "Say the vows." Titus looked up, his eyes watery. "To have and to hold," he rushed through the words, "from this day forward." Chloe didn't leave. She stood there, arms crossed, smirking. watching them like she was watching a bad reality TV show. When the officiant finally pronounced them husband and wife, and Titus kissed her, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a consolation prize. As they walked back down the aisle, Isabella had to walk right past her. Chloe didn't move out of the way. She forced them to swerve slightly to the left. As Isabella passed, Chloe leaned in, smelling of expensive Chanel perfume and gin. "Cute dress, Bella," she whispered, loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. "Shame it's wasted on a temporary arrangement." Isabella stumbled. Titus caught her elbow, propelling her forward, walking fast, practically running away from his own wedding ceremony. They got into the waiting vintage Rolls-Royce. As soon as the door closed, the silence broke. "What the hell was that, Titus?" Isabella screamed, tears finally spilling over. "You said she wasn't invited. You said security had a list." Titus rubbed his temples, looking like a man on the verge of a breakdown. "I don't know how she got in, Bella. I swear. She must have bribed the guards. You know how she is. She laughed at us. She laughed during our vows. And you said nothing." "I didn't want to make a scene," he yelled back. "It would have only made it worse." "Worse? How could it possibly be worse?" The car pulled up to the reception hall, the grand ballroom of the estate. Isabella wiped her face, trying to salvage her makeup. She had to go in there. She had to face 300 guests who had just watched her get humiliated by her husband's ex-girlfriend. But the real nightmare was just beginning, because Chloe wasn't done. She hadn't just come to watch. She had come to play. And as Isabella walked into the reception, trying to hold her head high, she saw that the seating chart had been altered. Table 1, the head table. There was an extra chair added, right across from the bride and groom, and sitting in it, swirling a glass of red wine, was Chloe. Isabella looked at Beatrice, who was already seated at the adjacent family table. Beatrice caught her eye. She took a slow sip of her champagne, her expression stony. She stood up. The room went quiet. Isabella thought, "Here it comes. She's going to tell me to leave. She's going to tell me that Chloe belongs here, and I don't." Beatrice walked over to the microphone on the small stage. She adjusted the stand. The feedback whined for a split second, silencing the room completely. She looked at Titus. Then she looked at Chloe. And finally, she looked at Isabella. "Ladies and gentlemen," Beatrice began, her voice crisp and commanding, like a general addressing troops. "If we could all take our seats. It seems we have an uninvited guest who believes she is the guest of honor, and I believe it is time we addressed the entertainment for the evening." Chloe smirked, raising her glass to Beatrice. "Cheers, B." Beatrice didn't smile. "Oh, put the glass down, you foolish girl," Beatrice said into the microphone. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "You aren't here to toast. You're here to learn a lesson." The silence in the ballroom following Beatrice's comment, "You're here to learn a lesson," lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Chloe laughed again. It wasn't the manic laugh from the altar. It was a low, throaty chuckle. She swirled her wine, looking Beatrice dead in the eye. "Careful, B. Stress is bad for the heart at your age. Besides," she turned her gaze to Titus, who was sweating through his tuxedo, "Titus wants me here. Don't you, Richie?" Titus looked like a man standing on a landmine. He opened his mouth, closed it, and finally muttered, Just let everyone eat, please." Her husband, the man she had just promised her life to. He couldn't even tell his ex-mistress to leave their table. The waiters, sensing the nuclear tension, rushed out with the first course, lobster bisque. The clinking of spoons against china was the only sound in the room. No one was talking. Everyone was watching table 1. Isabella tried to eat, but her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't hold the spoon. Chloe, however, had a hearty appetite. She tore into a bread roll, buttering it aggressively. "So, Isabella," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet like a serrated knife. She didn't look at the bride. She looked at the diamond on her finger. How does it feel? To win the lottery? Isabella put her spoon down. Excuse me? The lottery, she repeated, taking a sip of wine. Let's be honest. You're a graphic designer from... Where was it? Ohio? And now you're sitting at the Sterling table. It's a Cinderella story. Except, in the real version, the prince is usually in love with someone else. Chloe, stop, Titus hissed, gripping the tablecloth. Why? She batted her eyelashes. We're all friends here. I'm just making conversation. I mean, Bella deserves to know what she bought into. Did you tell her about the prenup, Titus? Or did you hide that page like you hid your phone in the Cayman Islands? Isabella's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? She asked, looking at Titus. Titus wouldn't meet her eyes. She's drunk, Bella. Ignore her. I'm perfectly sober, Chloe snapped. She leaned across the table, invading Isabella's personal space. The scent of her gin and perfume was suffocating. I'm talking about the fact that this wedding is a business transaction. My father, Senator Kensington, approved the zoning for Titus's new development project last week. And do you know what the condition was? She smiled, a predatory grin. That Titus keeps me happy. That I remain a priority. Isabella felt sick. The room started to spin. Is that true? She whispered to Titus. Is she here because of a deal? Titus closed his eyes. It's complicated, Bella. The business, the family legacy. We were going to lose the waterfront property if the senator didn't sign off. So you sold our wedding day? Isabella asked, her voice trembling. You let her humiliate me to save a building? It's not just a building, Titus snapped, his voice rising for the first time. It's millions of dollars. It's my mother's estate. You don't understand how this world works. Oh, she understands, Chloe purred. She's just realized she's the cheap accessory in a very expensive room. She reached out and patted Isabella's hand. Isabella recoiled as if she'd been burned. Don't touch me, she said, her voice low. Touchy, Chloe laughed. She turned to the waiter who was refilling water glasses. Bring me another bottle of the Pinot, and make sure it's the 2015 vintage. I know the Sterlings have it in the cellar. I helped buy it. At the adjacent table, Beatrice was eating her soup methodically, spoon in, away from herself. Sip. She seemed to be in a different world, completely ignoring the carnage happening 5 feet away. Isabella looked at her, pleading silently. Do something. You stood up before. Why did you stop? Beatrice dabbed her mouth with a linen napkin. She caught Isabella's eye. Her expression was hard, unyielding. She gave a microscopic shake of her head. Wait. Wait for what? To be completely destroyed. The main course arrived. Filet mignon. Chloe cut into her steak. You know, she said, chewing thoughtfully, I almost wore white today. I thought it would be funny. But then I thought, no, let the little girl have her moment. But looking at you now, you look so tired, Bella. Is the weight of the Sterling name too heavy? She pulled her phone out. Titus, show her the photos from last month. Titus froze. Chloe, don't. Show her, she commanded. Her voice wasn't playful anymore. It was hard. What photos? Isabella asked. Chloe turned her phone screen toward her before Titus could stop her. It was a photo taken on a boat, a yacht. Titus was shirtless, holding a champagne glass, and Chloe was in a bikini, sitting on his lap, kissing his cheek. The date stamp was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, when Titus told Isabella he was in Boston for a conference. The air left her lungs. The ballroom, the flowers, the music, it all dissolved. He came to say goodbye, Chloe whispered, her eyes gleaming with malice. He wanted one last weekend of freedom before he shackled himself to the plain Jane. He cried, you know. He told me he loved me, but he had to marry you because you were safe, because you wouldn't challenge him. She sat back, satisfied. You're the safe option, honey. You're the minivan. I'm the Ferrari. Isabella stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. The room went silent again. Isabella? Titus reached for her. "Don't," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But don't you dare." She turned and ran. She ran past the guests, past the cake that hadn't been cut, past the photographers. She burst through the double doors and ran down the hallway towards the bridal suite. She heard footsteps behind her. "Bella, wait!" It was Titus. Isabella didn't stop. She slammed the door of the bridal suite and tried to lock it, but he pushed his way in before the latch could click. The bridal suite was a massive room with floor-to-ceiling mirrors. Everywhere she looked, Isabella saw herself, a crying bride in a dress that cost more than her college tuition, realizing her life was a lie. "Get out!" she screamed, grabbing a crystal vase from the vanity. "Get out, or I swear to God, Titus, I will throw this!" Titus stood by the door, panting. He looked wrecked. His tie was undone, his hair messy. "Bella, please, put the vase down." "Let me explain." "Explain what?" She hurled the vase. It smashed against the wall, inches from his head, shattering into 1,000 pieces. "Explain that you slept with her 3 weeks ago? Explain that you're only marrying me because I'm safe. Explain that you let that monster ruin our wedding because you need her daddy's money." Titus flinched as the glass rained down. He slumped against the door, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, head in his hands. "I didn't have a choice," he sobbed. "You always have a choice," Isabella yelled. "You could have told me. You could have called off the wedding. Why did you drag me into this?" He looked up, his eyes red. "Because she has the ledger, Bella." Isabella stopped. "The what?" "The Kensington ledger," he whispered. "It's not just about the zoning. It's 5 years ago, when the market crashed, the company was going under. My father, he panicked. He moved money around, offshore accounts, tax shelters that weren't exactly legal." She stared at him, horror dawning on her. "You mean fraud?" "I mean survival," Titus cried. "We were going to lose everything. The breakers, the estate, everything." Senator Kensington helped cover it up. "Chloe knows. She has the copies of the original transfers. She told me if I didn't marry her eventually, she'd release them. But then I met you. And I fell in love with you, Bella. I swear I did." "So you slept with her to keep her quiet?" "I tried to buy time," he pleaded. "I went on the boat to beg her to let me go. She said she would, if I gave her one last weekend. I thought that was the end of it. I didn't know she was going to show up today. I didn't know she was going to do this." "You coward," she whispered. "You weak, spineless coward." "If I kick her out," Titus said, his voice hollow, "she sends the email. The IRS gets the files. My mother loses her home. I go to prison. That's the reality, Bella. That's why she's laughing. She owns us." Isabella sank onto the velvet sofa, burying her face in her hands. It was over. The marriage was a sham. The family was a crime syndicate. And she was the collateral damage. "Well," a voice said from the corner of the room, "that was a pathetic summary, Titus." Isabella jumped. Titus scrambled to his feet. They hadn't checked the heavy velvet curtains near the balcony. Beatrice Sterling stepped out from behind them. She wasn't holding a glass of wine anymore. She was holding a manila folder. She looked at Titus with a mixture of disgust and pity. "Mother?" Titus stammered. "How long?" "Were you listening?" "Long enough to hear you admit to federal crimes in front of a witness," Beatrice said calmly. She walked over to the vanity, avoiding the shattered glass on the floor. She picked up a tissue and handed it to Isabella. "Dry your face, Isabella," she commanded. "You look like a raccoon." Isabella took the tissue, too stunned to speak. "Beatrice, did you know that my late husband was a creative accountant?" "Yes," Beatrice said, smoothing her skirt. "That my son was foolish enough to be blackmailed by a glorified party girl. I suspected." She turned to Titus. "You thought you were protecting me by letting that harlot drag our name through the mud in front of the governor and the press." "She has the proof, Mother," Titus argued. "She has the bank transfers." "She has copies," Beatrice corrected. She walked over to Isabella and placed a hand on her shoulder. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Titus, you have always underestimated the women in this family. You think because I sit in the garden and arrange flowers that I am unaware of where the money comes from." Beatrice looked at Isabella. For the first time, her eyes weren't cold. They were fierce. They were the eyes of a wolf protecting its territory. "Isabella," she said, "do you love my son?" Isabella looked at Titus. He looked pathetic, broken, but she saw the fear in him. He wasn't evil. He was just weak. "I don't know right now," she said honestly. "I hate him right now." "Good," Beatrice nodded. "Hate is useful. It burns cleaner than despair. But do you want to let her win? Do you want to let Chloe Kensington walk out of here thinking she broke you?" Isabella thought about Chloe's laugh. She thought about being called a minivan. She thought about the way Chloe looked at her father, like he was the help. Something inside her hardened. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. "No," Isabella said. "I want to destroy her." Beatrice smiled. It was the first genuine smile Isabella had ever seen on her face. It was terrifying. Excellent. She tapped the manila folder against her palm. "Titus, fix your tie. Wash your face. You look guilty." She turned to the door. "Isabella, fix your makeup. Put on more lipstick. Red. The darkest shade you have." "What are we going to do?" Isabella asked, standing up. "We are going to go back into that reception," Beatrice said, opening the door. "We are going to cut the cake, and then I am going to give my toast. I have been saving a specific piece of information for a rainy day. And it seems—" She looked out the window where storm clouds were gathering. "It is pouring." She looked back at them. "Chloe thinks she holds the leverage because of what your father did in the past, Titus. But she forgot to check what her father is doing in the present." Beatrice held up the folder. "This isn't about the sterling taxes, my dears. This is the Kensington dossier, and I think it's time we shared it with the room." She offered Isabella her arm. Not Titus. Her. "Ready, daughter?" she asked. Isabella took a deep breath. She looked in the mirror one last time. The crying girl was gone. "Ready," she said. The walk back to the ballroom felt like a march into battle. Beatrice held Isabella's arm, not for support, but to anchor her. Her grip was iron. "Chin up," she murmured as they approached the double doors. "Shoulders back. You are a sterling now. Act like you own the building. Because technically, you do." The doors swung open. The room had devolved into a chaotic murmur. Half the guests were checking their phones, presumably texting the gossip to anyone who would listen. The other half were staring at table 1, where Chloe was holding court. She had moved from her seat and was actually sitting on the edge of the table, swinging her legs, laughing loudly at something one of Titus's college friends had said. When they stepped in, the change in the atmosphere was instantaneous. It rippled from the back of the room to the front. The band, who had been tentatively playing a jazz standard, trailed off into silence. Chloe looked up. She saw Titus, pale and freshly scrubbed, walking behind them like a chastised puppy. Then she saw Isabella. Isabella wasn't crying anymore. She had reapplied her makeup. Her lips were a deep crimson. She stared right at her enemy. And then Chloe saw Beatrice. Beatrice didn't look at the crowd. She walked straight to the cake table, pulling Isabella with her. The cake was a 6-tier masterpiece of vanilla and raspberry, untouched. "Titus," Beatrice said, her voice projecting without a microphone. "Come cut the cake with your wife." Chloe scoffed loudly. "Oh, give it up, Bea. The show's over. We all know the marriage is a sham." Beatrice ignored her. She handed Isabella the silver knife. Titus placed his hand over hers. His hand was trembling, but Isabella's was steady. They sliced into the bottom tier. Cameras flashed. The paid photographers doing their job on autopilot. "Smile," Isabella whispered to Titus, "or I'll stab you with this." He managed a weak, terrified grimace. Once the slice was plated, Beatrice took the knife from her. She set it down with a deliberate clack. She wiped her hands on a napkin, then turned and walked slowly to the stage. She tapped the microphone again. "If everyone could please take their seats," she said. It wasn't a request. It was an order. Chloe didn't sit. She stood by the table, hand on her hip, looking bored. "Is this the part where you beg for forgiveness?" she called out. Beatrice smiled. It was a smile that would have made a shark swim the other way. "This is the part," Beatrice said, her voice smooth as silk, "where we discuss the importance of charitable giving." The crowd looked confused. Chloe frowned. "As many of you know," Beatrice continued, "the Kensington family has always prided itself on its philanthropy, specifically the Kensington Youth Initiative, run by our lovely unexpected guest, Chloe." Chloe's posture stiffened slightly. "What are you talking about?" "The initiative," Beatrice went on, opening the manila folder she had brought with her. She put on a pair of reading glasses. "A wonderful charity. It funds yacht trips for underprivileged youth to gain experience in maritime skills. A noble cause." Beatrice looked up over her glasses. "However, it seems the definition of underprivileged youth is quite loose. According to these financial records," Beatrice pulled out a spreadsheet, waving it gently. "The funds from the charity were used to purchase high-end designer clothing, cover a lease on a penthouse in Manhattan, and pay for—" "Oh my," a very expensive silence. Chloe's face went white. "You don't know what you're talking about. Put that away." "I'm just reading, dear," Beatrice said innocently. "But what is most interesting isn't the embezzlement. It's the personnel file." Beatrice pulled out a photograph. It was a standard 8x10 headshot. "This is Maya Sorensen," Beatrice said, holding the photo up for the front row to see. "She was an intern for the Kensington Youth Initiative last summer. A bright girl, scholarship student. She went on one of those yacht trips, the one captained by your father, the senator, and hosted by you, Chloe." The room was deathly silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming. "Maya came back from that trip. Different," Beatrice said, her voice dropping an octave, "and then she disappeared. The official story was that she went backpacking in Europe. But strangely, her passport never left the country." "Shut up!" Chloe shrieked, her composure shattered. "Shut up, you old hag! You're making this up." "Am I?" Beatrice pulled a stapled document from the folder. "Because I have here a sworn affidavit from the deckhand who was working that night. He details exactly what happened on the boat, the party, the drugs provided by the host, and the accident that happened on the lower deck." Chloe lunged forward. "Titus, stop her! She's lying!" Titus stepped forward, finally finding his spine. He stood between Chloe and his mother. "Sit down, Chloe." "I will not!" Chloe screamed. She looked around the room, wild-eyed. "She's bluffing! She's just trying to distract you from her son's fraud." "My son's tax evasion is a federal crime," Beatrice said calmly into the mic. "He will likely face fines, maybe probation. We have excellent lawyers." She paused for effect. "But covering up the involuntary manslaughter of a minor and using charity funds to pay off the witnesses, that, my dear, is 20 to life." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. A wine glass shattered somewhere in the back. Chloe stood frozen. Her red dress, once a symbol of power, now looked like a target. "The deckhand was very expensive to find," Beatrice said, closing the folder. "But as you pointed out earlier, the Sterlings have deep pockets, and unlike you, we don't pay for silence. We pay for the truth." Beatrice took off her glasses. "Now," she said, "I believe there are 2 gentlemen waiting in the lobby who would very much like a word with you, Chloe. They aren't wedding guests. They are from the FBI." Chloe didn't move for a long time. She looked at Beatrice, then at Titus, and finally at her father's political allies sitting at table 4. They were all looking down at their plates, distancing themselves as fast as physically possible. She realized in that moment that she was alone. The power she thought she held, the threat of the tax fraud, was nothing compared to the nuclear bomb Beatrice had just detonated. "You ruined my life," Chloe whispered. "You did that yourself," Beatrice replied, her voice amplified by the speakers. "I simply turned on the lights." Chloe let out a strangled sob. She turned and ran, but she didn't get far. As she reached the double doors, they opened from the outside. 2 men in dark suits stood there, flashing badges. Behind them were 2 uniformed police officers. "Chloe Kensington?" one of the agents asked. "No, no, no," Chloe backed away, knocking over a flower arrangement. Water and roses spilled across the marble floor. "My father is a senator! You can't touch me!" "Your father is currently being questioned in D.C., ma'am," the agent said, stepping forward and grabbing her wrist. "You have the right to remain silent." The guests watched in morbid fascination as the woman who had laughed during the vows was handcuffed in her scarlet dress. She was screaming, thrashing, her heels scraping against the floor. "Titus, help me! I love you!" she wailed as they dragged her out. Titus watched her go. He didn't move. He looked sick. When the doors closed, the silence in the ballroom was heavy, thick with shock. Beatrice stood on the stage. She adjusted the microphone stand one last time. "My apologies for the interruption," she said, her voice returning to the polite, hosting tone of a society matriarch. "It seems we have cleared out the trash. Please enjoy the filet mignon. It is excellent this evening." She stepped down from the stage. The band, professional to a fault, started playing "The Way You Look Tonight." No one danced. Beatrice walked back to the head table. She sat down, placed the napkin on her lap, and picked up her fork. She looked at Isabella. "Eat, Isabella," she said. "You'll need your strength." Isabella looked at her. "Is it true," she whispered, "about the girl?" "Maya." "Every word," Beatrice said, slicing her steak. "I've been building that file for 6 months. I was saving it for the election cycle to destroy her father, but—" She took a sip of wine. "I decided today was a better occasion." Isabella looked at Titus. He was staring at his mother with a look of absolute terror. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that the most dangerous person in his life wasn't his mistress or the IRS. It was the woman who gave birth to him. "Mother," Titus croaked, "the tax fraud." "You said—" "I said we have lawyers," Beatrice cut him off. "And we do, but Titus, make no mistake, you are going to pay for what you did. You jeopardized this family. You humiliated your wife." Beatrice put her fork down and turned her entire body toward him. "You are going to step down as CEO of Sterling Enterprises, effective tomorrow morning. You are going to sign over your voting rights to Isabella." Titus choked on his water. "What?" Isabella looked up, stunned. "Me?" "You," Beatrice said, looking at her with a strange sort of respect. "You didn't run away. You wiped your face. You came back in here, and you stood your ground. You have more spine in your little finger than my son has in his entire body." She reached across the table and took Isabella's hand. "Men like Titus ruin empires," she said. "Women like us build them. If you stay with him, and I'm not saying you should, but if you do, you will hold the leash. Do you understand?" Isabella looked at Titus. He looked defeated. He knew he had no cards left to play. She looked at the guests, who were slowly starting to eat and whisper, the shock wearing off into excitement. They would talk about this wedding for decades. She squeezed Beatrice's hand back. "I understand," she said. The reception continued. It was a surreal, fever dream of a party. Isabella danced with her father, who was still trembling from the scene. She accepted congratulations from guests who looked at her with a mix of pity and awe. But the night wasn't over. As the clock struck midnight and the guests began to filter out, a server tapped her on the shoulder. "Mrs. Sterling?" he asked. "Yes?" "There's a delivery for you, in the lobby." "A gift?" "I don't think so, ma'am. It's a person." Her heart skipped a beat. Had Chloe come back? Isabella walked out to the lobby, Beatrice and Titus trailing behind her. Standing by the front desk was a young woman. She looked thin, tired, and scared. She was wearing a backpack and a hoodie. It was the girl from the photo. It was Maya Sorensen. Beatrice stopped in her tracks. For the first time all day, she looked shocked. "I thought," Beatrice whispered, "I thought she was in hiding." The girl looked up. She saw Beatrice and burst into tears. "You sent the plane ticket," Maya sobbed. "You said it was safe to come home now." Isabella looked at Beatrice. Beatrice's mask fell for a split second. Isabella saw the humanity underneath the ice. She hadn't just used this girl as leverage. She had actually found her. She had saved her. Beatrice walked over and wrapped the girl in a stiff, awkward hug. "You are safe," Beatrice said. "He can't hurt you anymore. He's going to prison." Isabella watched them, and then she felt a hand on her waist. "Titus." "Bella," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." She turned to look at him. The adrenaline was fading, and the exhaustion was setting in. "Don't touch me, Titus," she said calmly. "Please," he begged. "We can fix this. Mother fixed it." "Your mother fixed her problems," she said, stepping away from him, "and she fixed the Chloe problem. But she didn't fix us." Isabella took off her engagement ring, the heavy diamond that Chloe had mocked. "Isabella!" Titus's face crumbled. "I'm keeping the voting rights," she said, clutching the ring in her fist. "And I'm keeping the name. But I'm not keeping you. Not tonight." She walked over to the front desk, where the concierge was watching with wide eyes. "I need a separate room," she said. "The best suite you have available. Charge it to Titus Sterling." She turned back to the trio, the crying girl, the iron mother, and the broken husband. "Good night," she said. She walked to the elevator alone. The morning sun over Newport was blindingly bright, mocking the darkness of the night before. Isabella hadn't slept. She had spent the night in the suite, staring at the ceiling, watching the news alerts scroll across her phone screen. "Breaking, Senator Kensington arrested in midnight raid. Scandal at sea. The missing intern found. Wedding crasher. Socialite Chloe Kensington. Denied bail." At 8 a.m., a sharp knock came at her door. It wasn't room service. It was Beatrice's personal assistant. "Mrs. Sterling," she said, devoid of emotion. "Mrs. Sterling Sr. requests your presence on the terrace for breakfast. Mr. Pendleton is here." Arthur Pendleton, the family lawyer. Isabella showered, scrubbing the hairspray and the smell of the wedding out of her hair. She put on a white linen suit, crisp, clean armor. She didn't look like a bride anymore. She looked like a CEO. When she walked out to the terrace, the scene was serene. The ocean glittered. Beatrice was drinking Earl Grey tea, reading the Wall Street Journal. Titus was there, too. He was wearing dark sunglasses, slumped in his chair, looking like a man awaiting execution. "Sit, Isabella," Beatrice said, not looking up from the paper. "Coffee is poured." Isabella sat. "Where is he?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair. "Arthur is setting up the paperwork," Beatrice said. She folded the newspaper. "Did you see the headlines?" "Hard to miss," she said. "Is it true they found drugs on the senator's boat?" "Kilos," Beatrice said with a satisfied sigh. "The man was arrogant. He thought he was untouchable. Now he's radioactive." She looked at Titus. "Which makes you, Titus, incredibly lucky that I intervened before you tied yourself closer to that sinking ship." Titus took off his sunglasses. His eyes were bloodshot. "I know, Mother. I know. I'm grateful." "Don't be grateful yet," a gravelly voice said. Arthur Pendleton walked onto the terrace. He was a small man with glasses thick enough to see into the future. He carried a heavy leather briefcase. He sat down and opened the case. He pulled out a thick document bound in blue paper. "The prenuptial agreement," Arthur announced. Titus perked up slightly. "Right, the prenup. We need to review it. Obviously, things have changed." He looked at Isabella nervously. "Bella, I know you're angry, but we need to protect the assets." "Protect them from whom, Titus?" Arthur asked, peering over his spectacles. From uncertainty," Titus stammered. Arthur chuckled dryly. You didn't read the final draft I sent over the morning of the wedding, did you, Titus? I was a little busy, Titus snapped. I just signed the signature page you flagged. Standard procedure, Beatrice murmured into her teacup. Arthur turned to Isabella. Isabella, did you read it? I skimmed it, she admitted. I trusted Titus. I thought it just said if we divorce, I leave with what I came with. That was draft 1, Arthur said. However, Beatrice requested an amendment to draft 4, the competency and morality clause. Titus frowned. What is that? Arthur began to read. In the event that the primary beneficiary, Titus Sterling, engages in public conduct that threatens the reputation or financial solvency of Sterling Enterprises, including, but not limited to, adultery, criminal association, or public scandal, the control of the family trust does not dissolve. Arthur paused. Instead, the power of attorney and the voting rights for the Sterling majority share transfer immediately to the legal spouse. The silence on the terrace was absolute. A seagull cried overhead. Titus's mouth fell open. What? It means, Beatrice said, setting her cup down, that as of the moment Chloe walked down that aisle and you admitted to your indiscretions, you lost control of the company, Titus. You can't do that. Titus stood up, knocking his chair over. It's my money. It's grandfather's trust. It's my money, Beatrice snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. Your father lost his share years ago. I rebuilt this fortune, and I will not let a weak, spineless boy squander it on hush money for strippers and yachts. She pointed a manicured finger at him. Sit down. Titus sat. He looked at Isabella, terrified. So, he whispered, she controls it? Bella? Isabella controls the voting bloc, Arthur confirmed. She decides the board members. She approves the dividends. She controls your allowance. My allowance? Titus squeaked. You are effectively an employee of your wife, Beatrice said, as long as you remain married. Isabella stared at the document. The anger that had been burning in her since the wedding cooled into something solid. Power. And if I divorce him, she asked. Then the clause is void, Arthur said. The trust reverts to a neutral board of directors until Titus is 50. You get a payout, but you lose the control. She looked at Titus. She looked at the man who had let his mistress laugh at her, the man who had treated her like a safe option. If she left him now, she would be the sad, divorced girl who got humiliated at her wedding. She'd have some money, sure, but he would eventually get it all back. But if she stayed, she would own him. Isabella looked at Beatrice. The old woman was watching her closely, testing her. She wanted to see if Isabella had the stomach for it. Isabella picked up the silver coffee pot and poured herself a fresh cup. She took a sip. Arthur, she said, her voice steady. Where do I sign to ratify the transfer? Titus gasped. Bella, please, you can't be serious. We can just start over. We are starting over, Titus, she said, picking up the pen. But this time, I'm the one driving the Ferrari. You're the minivan. She signed the document. Beatrice smiled. She raised her teacup to her. Welcome to the family, Isabella. 1 year later, the annual Sterling Foundation Gala was the highlight of the Newport social season. Tickets were $5,000 a plate. Everyone who was anyone was there. Isabella stood at the top of the grand staircase at the Breakers. Her dress was black velvet, strapless, with a diamond choker that had belonged to Beatrice's grandmother. You look formidable, a voice said behind her. Isabella turned. Beatrice was sitting in her wheelchair. She had grown frailer in the last few months, her energy finally waning. But her eyes were still sharp. Thank you, Beatrice, Isabella said, resting her hand on the older woman's shoulder. Are you ready to go down? I think I'll watch from the balcony tonight, she said. My legs are tired. And besides, it's your show now. It was. In the year since the wedding of the century, as the tabloids called it, everything had changed. Chloe Kensington was currently serving year 1 of a 15-year sentence for involuntary manslaughter and fraud. The senator had resigned in disgrace, Their family name, once gold, was now mud. And Titus? Isabella looked down into the ballroom. Titus was there near the orchestra. He was chatting with a group of investors. He looked handsome, polished. He was laughing at a joke. But every few minutes his eyes darted up to the balcony, to check on her, to make sure he was doing what he was supposed to be doing. They were still married. To the outside world, they were the couple that survived the storm. They were the picture of forgiveness and resilience. In private, they lived in separate wings of the estate. Titus ran the charitable arm of the company, a position Isabella assigned him to keep him busy and make him look good. He had to ask her permission for any expenditure over $5,000. He had to run his schedule by her assistant. He was terrified of losing her. Not because he loved her, though she thought in his twisted way he learned to respect her, but because he knew that without her, he was nothing. Isabella? She turned back to the stairs. A young woman was walking up. She was beautiful, maybe 22. She was the daughter of a new oil tycoon from Texas. Mrs. Sterling? She asked, a little breathless. I just wanted to say, I admire you so much. The way you handled everything last year. You're an inspiration. Thank you, Isabella said politely. And your husband is so charming. She giggled, glancing down at Titus. He was just telling me about his polo ponies. He said I should come see them sometime. Isabella froze. She looked down at Titus. He was watching the girl. He wasn't flirting overtly, but she saw that familiar gleam in his eye. That need for validation. That weakness. Isabella looked back at the girl. She didn't smile. My husband, she said, her voice dropping the temperature in the hallway, often forgets that the ponies don't belong to him. They belong to the estate. The girl's smile faltered. Oh, I didn't know. There are a lot of things people don't know, Isabella said, stepping closer to her. Let me give you some advice, from one woman to another. The Sterling family is very protective of its assets. We don't like trespassers. She held her gaze until the girl looked away, flustered. I should go find my father, the girl stammered. She hurried down the stairs. Isabella watched her go. Then she caught Titus's eye from across the room. He saw the girl run off. He saw his wife standing there. He went pale. He immediately excused himself from his group and walked towards the bar, keeping his head down. Ruthlessness suits you, Beatrice said softly from her chair. I had a good teacher, Isabella replied. I'm dying, Isabella, Beatrice said suddenly. Isabella turned to her. She wasn't surprised. She had seen the medical reports. I know, she said. When I go, Beatrice said, looking out over the crowd of people drinking their champagne and eating their food. Titus will try to challenge you. He will try to break the contract. Let him try, Isabella said. I have the board, I have the lawyers, and I have the public. Good, Beatrice nodded. She reached out and took Isabella's hand. Her skin was papery and cold. I was worried, you know. When he first brought you home, I thought you were too soft. Too nice. I was, Isabella said. Then someone laughed at me. Beatrice chuckled. A dry, rasping sound. Yes, that was her mistake. She thought she was the villain of the story. She didn't realize she was just the plot device that created the hero. She squeezed Isabella's hand. Go down there, Isabella. Go greet your guests. It's the Sterling Gala. Isabella straightened her dress. She touched the diamond choker. It's the Davis Sterling Gala now, she corrected her gently. Beatrice smiled, closing her eyes. So it is. Isabella walked down the grand staircase alone. The conversation in the room stopped as she descended. Hundreds of eyes turned to her. She didn't look for Titus. She didn't look for approval. She looked straight ahead, chin up, shoulders back. She was the woman in the black velvet dress. She was the one who survived. And as she stepped onto the marble floor, nobody dared to laugh. And that is the story of Isabella, the bride who turned a humiliation into an empire. It's a brutal reminder that in the game of power, The one who laughs last laughs best. Now I have a question for you. If you were Isabella, would you have signed that contract? Would you have stayed with Titus to control the money and exact your revenge? Or would you have walked away with your dignity and left them all to rot? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, class warfare, and karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss next week's story, which might just be even crazier than this one. Thanks for listening. Stay safe. And remember, be careful who you laugh at.